It all started like just another ordinary flight. The crew was busy preparing, passengers were boarding, and the usual shuffle of bags, tickets, and small conversations filled the cabin. Among the travelers was a woman who didn't look like much at first glance. She wore simple clothes, carried a modest bag, and kept to herself. To most people, she blended right in with the crowd. But what no one realized was that she was far from ordinary. Behind that quiet appearance was someone with wealth and influence beyond. Imagination undercover billionaire who chose to travel without revealing her true identity. As the flight began to board, one of the attendants noticed something about her. Maybe it was the way she walked in, or perhaps the fact that she didn't carry herself like the usual business traveler. Whatever it was, the flight attendant made a quick judgment. In a world where airlines are strict about rules, sometimes assumptions can take over. The attendant believed the woman didn't belong there, that maybe she had made a mistake or was even on the wrong flight. Without much hesitation, the attendant decided to act. Passengers watched with confusion as the quiet woman was asked to step aside. She was calm, didn't argue, and didn't try to pull rank or prove who she was. To the attendant, she was just another passenger causing a small inconvenience. But to those paying attention, something about her reaction felt unusual. Why wasn't she upset? Why wasn't she fighting back? And then, just as the tension began to rise, the woman looked straight at the attendant and spoke with words that stopped everyone in their tracks. Her voice was steady, not loud, but filled with authority. She said something that shifted the entire atmosphere of the cabin, leaving the attendant frozen in disbelief. The cabin grew quiet, almost too quiet, as if the air itself was holding its breath. The flight attendant, who had been so sure of her decision just moments ago, now stood frozen. The woman's words echoed in her mind. "This is my flight." Simple, clear, and delivered with a calmness that carried more weight than any argument could. Passengers leaned forward in their seats, curious eyes darting back and forth, trying to piece together who this woman really was and why she spoke with such certainty. The truth was, very few people knew her story. She wasn't the type to flaunt her wealth, nor did she travel with assistants or flashy displays of power. For years, she had lived under the radar, preferring to blend in rather than stand out. She often chose commercial flights over private jets, believing that it kept her connected to everyday life. But behind that modest appearance was a billionaire with businesses spread across continents. A woman who could buy the entire airline if she wished, chose not to reveal it. The flight attendant, however, didn't know any of this. All she saw was a passenger who looked out of place. Someone who didn't fit her picture of what a wealthy traveler should be. And in that moment of judgment, she had made a mistake that was quickly unraveling in front of an entire plane of witnesses. The woman remained calm, her eyes steady, almost challenging the silence that followed. Every second that passed only built more suspense. Passengers whispered to each other, wondering if she was a high-ranking official, a celebrity in disguise, or someone with influence they couldn't even begin to imagine. The tension in the air was thick, and the flight had not even left the ground yet. What would happen next was something no one on that plane was prepared for. The flight attendant's heart pounded as she tried to regain control of the situation. Her training had taught her to remain firm, but something about the passenger's calm confidence unsettled her. "This is my flight," the woman had said, and those words carried more weight than any ID or boarding pass could. The attendant glanced around the cabin, aware that dozens of curious faces were now watching her every move. She could feel the judgment in their eyes, as if the entire plane was silently questioning her decision. Meanwhile, the woman stood perfectly still, her hands folded neatly in front of her. She didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her silence spoke louder than anything else, and it only deepened the mystery. Was she a powerful investor traveling incognito, a government official whose identity had to remain secret, or perhaps someone with ties to the airline itself? Whispers rippled through the rows as passengers speculated, each theory more dramatic than the last. In the cockpit, the pilot had been alerted about the disturbance. From his seat, he weighed his options carefully. A delayed takeoff could mean angry passengers and strict penalties for the airline, but allowing the wrong person to stay on board could mean an even bigger issue. He had no idea that the woman at the center of it all was far from an ordinary traveler. The tension spread beyond the crew and into the passengers. A businessman in first class tapped impatiently on his laptop, muttering about missed meetings. A mother traveling with her child clutched her daughter's hand, uneasy about the rising uncertainty. And yet, many couldn't tear their eyes away from the woman who stood so firmly, as though the entire flight somehow belonged to her. No one knew it yet. This was only the surface of a much larger story, one that would challenge assumptions, test loyalties, and reveal truths that could shake more than just this single flight. The atmosphere inside the cabin was electric, every second stretching longer than the last. The flight attendant, still caught between her duty and her doubts, felt her authority slipping away. She had never experienced anything like this, a passenger who gave no documents, no resistance, and yet somehow commanded more control of the room than she did. The woman's steady gaze never wavered, and that only made the silence heavier. The pilot's voice crackled through the intercom, requesting a private word with the crew. The flight attendant excused herself quickly, leaving the passengers whispering and exchanging anxious glances. In that moment, the woman took her seat, crossing her legs with the quiet confidence of someone who belonged exactly where she was. The people nearby leaned in, hoping to catch a clue in her expression, but her face revealed nothing. It was as though she was playing a game that only she knew the rules to. Back at the front of the plane, the discussion grew tense. The captain pressed for answers. Who was this passenger, and why was she causing delays? The flight attendant tried to explain, but her voice faltered as she repeated the woman's words. "This is my flight." The captain frowned, puzzled. Was it arrogance, or was there truth behind those words? Either way, the clock was ticking, and the airline couldn't afford to wait much longer. Meanwhile, the passengers grew restless. Some pulled out phones, recording discreetly, sensing that this was no ordinary dispute. A teenager in the back whispered that he had seen the woman on a financial magazine cover, while another passenger insisted she looked like a philanthropist who had quietly funded major charities. The theories only fed the growing tension. I was now fixed on the aisle, waiting for the crew to return and reveal what would happen next. The suspense had reached its peak, and the question hung thick in the air. Would the mysterious woman be escorted off, or would the airline discover the shocking truth about who she really was? The cabin door suddenly opened, and a man in a dark suit stepped inside. He wasn't part of the flight crew, and he didn't look like a regular passenger either. His presence was sharp, calculated, and immediately drew everyone's attention. Without saying a word, he scanned the cabin until his eyes landed on the woman. For the first time, her expression shifted ever so slightly. Recognition. It was clear they knew each other, but no one could guess how. Passengers leaned in, their whispers growing louder. Who was this man, and why had he come aboard just minutes before takeoff? The flight attendant froze again, unsure if she should intervene. The suited man spoke quietly to the crew, his voice low but urgent. Whatever he said made the captain's brow furrow and the attendant's hands tighten nervously around her clipboard. The tension doubled in an instant. The woman remained calm, though her eyes followed the man's every move. If she had been a mystery before, now the plot had deepened. Who exactly was she that someone like him would appear on the aircraft, unannounced, just as the conflict was reaching its boiling point? Passengers began forming their own stories. Some believed he was airline security. Others whispered he was a government agent. A few were convinced this was proof the woman was far more powerful than anyone realized. Every new theory only fueled the growing unease then, just as the cabin seemed ready to erupt with speculation. The man walked down the aisle and stopped right beside her. His words were quiet, but everyone could hear them. "Ma'am, they don't know who you are. Do you want me to explain?" The question sent a chill through the air. Even the flight attendant's face drained of color. Whatever truth was about to come out, it was clear that this flight was heading into something far bigger than a simple misunderstanding. The stakes had just been raised, and the real story was only beginning to unfold. The cabin was silent as every eye fixed on the woman and the man in the suit. The tension had built to a breaking point. And now it felt like the truth was finally about to surface. Did she say that changed everything in that moment? And how did the flight turn from routine to unforgettable in just a few words? The answer left everyone stunned, and it was only the beginning of a story no one on that plane would ever forget.